It is a religion. It has a superhuman deity, government that has rights that mortals don't. It issues commands, and if you disobey, you're a sinner, and you deserve to be punished. It doesn't play by the rules of mortals.
Hey yo, I ride slump when I bump. That anarchist hardcore punk. Pistol grip pumped in the trunk. Don't give a fuck if a pig throw on his leg. Shit, I study natural law, bitch. I know my rights. I'ma fight for liberty and justice. Cause no, I don't trust this corrupted system of globalist muppets whose authority only exists to these foolish bastards. Only answer to the one, I don't serve two masters. Stupid asses, parrot in the party line. Dumb enough to still fall for the left-right paradigm. Blind by their slogans, the party sets the stage. Choosing a ruler every 4 years don't make you any less a slave. Play term after term, time after time. A vicious cycle, the blind leading the blind. Too weak in the mind to see the design of their own prison. Well, there ain't no fool in this one. Fuck the whole system, man.
Greetings, guillotine operators. Welcome back to Disenthrall. I am Patrick Smith. Today we have an interesting show. As always, I always say interesting show. Man, I hope I never let this show not be interesting. But today we have with us a special guest and somebody that I've wanted to talk to, have a long, intensive conversation with for a great deal of time. Luis Fernando Mises. He is a consultant that teaches leadership all over the United States, a yoga instructor, a meditation teacher, a student of Austrian economics, a statesman with the Libertarian Party. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe we can get into it. A curandero. I really have no idea what that means. An entrepreneur, a family man. He realized his personal mission was to empower others and to be present. And this realization propelled him to create Emancipated Human as a way to bring stories that would help people see the nature of the police state we currently live in, ideas to hack the world, interviews with people that have practical examples and inspiration to live a freer life. Welcome to the show, sir. Great to have you. I did it again.
You get this going for a while. What happened?
I had you muted because I always do that to my guests. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay. No, just happy to be here finally.
Yeah, man. So the reason, I guess the thing that gave me the excuse to ask you to come on today was the Consciousness and Psychedelics Conference, which I mean, I promise you 6 years ago wouldn't have been a place you'd catch Patrick Smith dead at. So it was really interesting to expose myself to radically different ideas than the ones I'm used to. And man, the past 5 to 6 years of my life that I have been a voluntarist libertarian has just been a constant, relentless learning and changing experience. I don't think there's a single facet of my life that has been left unchanged. And so now it's almost like I go looking for things that I have an innate negative reaction to, and I go seeking that stuff to learn more about it, because so often I find that, I had some deep misconceptions about it. And I've just grown to start loving the process of challenging myself and forcing myself to crack the brain open to ideas that were previously uncomfortable. And this event was certainly one of them. And you were the MC there, right?
Yes, I was. That was so much fun.
And you're pretty active amongst these circles. I don't know what you'd call it. What would you call those circles? Because when I call them, when I call it the hippie conference, to me, that is a cute, endearing term, but I don't want it to come off as insulting. So what term should we use to talk about these kinds of things?
I really don't know. There's I think it's just consciousness. Those of us are interested into knowing what that is, because nobody really knows what the hell consciousness is anyway. So we're exploring, we're trying to expand. And the idea of hippie, what comes to mind is somebody that doesn't shower and that's smelly and but I mean, I shop at Whole Foods. So some people will consider me a hippie, because I'm a vegetarian, have been a vegetarian for 11 years. I'm a yoga instructor, I shop at Whole Foods. So it's the crunchiness conference, if you will. So, but you mentioned something really important, and I want to actually talk about that. Like you said, I like to go towards things that make me uncomfortable. And I think that's the one most powerful sign for me that person is serious about growth and really powerful in the mind, because when we just try to hide, like, this is uncomfortable, I don't want to touch it, it's going to bite you in the butt. Like, so the way the life works, it presents you with opportunities, and you can jump on them, or you can just kind of like ride and not do it, and then you're forced to live them and explore them, and then it's not as fun. So just going towards, like, you can learn through pain, or you can learn like in the Renaissance style, because learning is fun, so which is what you've been doing. Otherwise it's like you pay a higher tuition for that university.
Yeah, or you just kind of fade away. It's like the Simpsons meme where he just kind of backs into the bush and disappears. It's like you can have an existence where you're just in the bush the whole time. You don't experience anything new. You never stretch your mind. You go to work, you make money, you pay your bills, you play your Xbox when you get home or whatever. And that can be your thing. That is not me, unfortunately for some people. But so I'm not sure how to approach this conversation. So let me try and list the biases that I was trying to challenge by going to this conference. Maybe that's a good place to try and set it up. And for those that didn't see it, I released a video yesterday, I believe. It was kind of a vlog of the day. I did a few interviews, and you can hear me talk through some of these subjects with the people and see, and like literally see me being challenged. Like, I remember the first conversation I had on that video, in the early part of the conversation, it was like 4 minutes in. Watch my face when she says that, in her experience with ayahuasca, she saw like the entire world and all life. And watch my face. I was like, it was just like you're talking nonsense. Like the words that you just said is like an unreasonable thing to say. And that right there is kind of it's like a microcosm. It's like a perfect caricature of everything that bothers me about, let's call it the crunchy convention, because that's less insulting. Yeah. Not intending to be insulting. It's just like there's so many people that make baseless claims. That's another thing that annoys me. Things that cannot be proven. Things that, especially when you start calling things medicine. And I'll get to where I learned something new on this later. I'm just trying to go through my biases first. When you start talking about treating issues and illnesses and like psychological problems, it's like you're moving from a recreational hobby that I could care less what you do to have fun in your free time. Now you're moving into something where you're potentially causing harm to people by having them not try the quote unquote legitimate treatment methods and instead try this, what I will call woo, like woo woo, right? And again, please understand my intention is not to be insulting. I'm using the best words that I can, and if you have better words, I will endeavor to use them. So that was,
I'm not like, I don't think it's insulting at all. I think it's like really important to like, whatever it is that you're thinking or feeling, that we put it out and then we can expand it. Like, I think that's how growth happens, like you tell me one thing and then I tell you another, and then we find the meaning together. And it's not like, I'm going to win or you're going to win. Like we're creating the understanding as it's happening. So do you want me to talk about the medicine part in that, or do you want to like add some more? Because I do have some like legitimate issues that will be, kind of a parallel to your, I guess, reasoning.
Yeah, I don't want to give you so much that you can't respond to each individual thing. So yeah, if go for it. So
I think it's kind of like a journey situation, like when I first became an anarchist, I was, fuck the police and I was really anti, the army and their welfare whores and all this, like, the first iteration of the anarchist mind is to be upset.
Level one. Yep.
Yeah, as you move, you see that the world is actually complex and it's just not black and white. And so the medicine situation, and I do think that there is a lot of times where it's much more convenient and easier to go Western medicine route and not die, like there's Western medicine is amazing for emergency purposes. It's amazing for like super fast action that we didn't have in the old ages, surgeries and stuff like that. But there's also like the idea that it is called a medicine because it is not just. It is ayahuasca could be. Like there are songs about ayahuasca, which are called icaros, that she is the doctor. And in that sense, so I will just quickly walk you through that idea. So whenever, like this is something that requires the presupposition that there is not just the physical body. So whenever somebody gets into this kind of work, at this point, I still consider myself an atheist in the strict sense of the word. Like I don't believe in a separate entity that is a god that's watching outside like a kid with an ant farm. I believe in non-dualism where we're all together, and this is like a part of the entire play of consciousness. So whenever we have trauma, the trauma usually stays in the reptilian part of the brain, which is pure emotion, and it doesn't have words. So what ayahuasca does is it somehow gets into the oldest part of your brain. It starts digging out all that trauma, and it brings it to images, brings it to words, and brings it to understanding to where you can heal those things. So it's not like a magic healing. It's something that like therapy could do, but in a much deeper sense. So it is not something that is a panacea that is going to heal all things, but it is it is something that will cure a lot of spiritual, mental, emotional issues.
So I pulled up the definition of medicine because I did this before I went to that conference, and this was the beginning of a change in perception of the word. Previously, I was, I guess you'd say, triggered when people, crunchy people, would call things medicine. And when I dug into that, I realized that, there's definitely some sort of latent indoctrination or training or bias into, the belief in the ultimate authority of licensed doctors, licensed professional medical medicine. Now, while there's a lot of validity to that because, they go through like 14 years of very intense training to get that knowledge and understanding. So it's not like there's not a good reason to trust in it. But when I looked up the definition of medicine before I went to the conference, because I was like, these people call everything medicine. And I even said this a couple times in the interview that I was talking to at the thing. I'm like, a heroin addict would call her heroin her medicine. Like that. It's either a meaningless term or it's going to be, we need to hold it to a higher, more objective definition. And so I was like, well, let me look up the definition of medicine. And here, right there, number 3, a substance such as a drug or potion. And I read that and I was like, oh God, am I wrong? Used to treat something other than disease. And so like, if you read through, the parts of this definition, yes, it does. One of the definitions refers to, something medically researched or whatever, but it also seems to just be like an object held in traditional American Indian belief to give control over natural or magical forces. So this is a word that's, been used for all different things. And I guess I'm just, I had just previously been on a crusade to make it mean, something more rigorous than it was. So this was the beginning of Patrick's mind opening up that day. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that I want to commend you because, like I was telling you, there's a word that I really like, and it's fallibilism, and the idea that we can have a mistake, that we don't have all the answers, and opening up and seeing what the hell. So it takes a lot of balls to do that. So I commend you for that. So there is a problem because, there's some people that may have low education or low support system, like, not a lot of people around them. And then sometimes they gravitate towards some people that claim to heal all sorts of things. And then they do abuse them and they do to take advantage of them. So that shit does happen. And it happens more often than I would like, I mean, one time is more often than I would like, but the point is, like, it happens regularly. You can see, like, a lot of people being not taking the medicine because they're afraid that all, like broad organization, like, I don't know if I'm going to be in a good place. I don't know if they're going to take advantage of me. So there is that happens, that they misuse it. They misuse the term medicine, and they sell cures for things that are not. So that is an important thing. And just like anything, like, there are good anarchists and bad anarchists, and there are good dentists and there are bad dentists. So there's good students of shamanism and there's bad students of shamanism. That doesn't make it, like, so the whole thing is it puts a mirror in front of you, and it shows you all the shit and all the trauma and all the darkness in you. And then so there's two proclivities. Like, one is, like, you're going to open up and like be really sorry and apologize and change your ways, or you're going to hide from it, and then you're going to become an even more dubious individual. So those are, like, when like people that take ayahuasca that are, like, still pretty shitty, it's because they're not integrating and they're not, like, seeing what they need to see. But there's also the people that are like, okay, yeah, this is really hard stuff, because nobody wants to be told that they're, like, assholes and idiots and mean and evil. So it does take a lot of work here.
Yeah, it was like a whole nother dictionary when I walked into the building, and I'm so protective, like, studying philosophy. I've just trained myself to be so protective against people changing the definitions of words and using different or strange language to describe things, because it's usually a red flag for them smuggling in some misconception or break in logic or something that's going to make things fall apart. And so that was another thing that was a trigger. I don't know, trigger's the wrong word. It was a bias against crunchy spaces, let's say, because they speak just a totally different language sometimes. Like, you talked about integration, more on that, in a little bit. I found out that was an actual clinical term. And so I was misassociating that with crunchiness. But, they talk about, God, it's hard to even think of it now, but, I remember at the end of the conference, I walked up to this table, and it was, I don't want to call them out specifically, but they were talking about being a local group, or a Texas-based group that runs sort of these monthly sessions for people to come, and after they have experiences with any of the, I guess, what would you call them, psychedelics, whatever, they called them, like,
entheogens.
Okay, yes. And so they'll have these sessions where a bunch of people will come and they'll sit in a circle, and they'll all bring up issues that they're having as a result of having had these experiences. And the names that they use for those meetings just seem totally weird and nonsensical. It was like holistic integration, something group something. And I'm like, wait, let's break that down. And I broke it down, and we went word by word with her, and she was just describing group therapy. And I'm like, so why didn't you just say group therapy? And this was the next time Patrick's brain was cracked open, was she said, well, we can't call it therapy because that's a medical thing that is, controlled. That's a word, that's a magic word that the government keeps control over from a medical licensing standpoint. So they can't say that they're offering group therapy. They have to use these other weird crunchy words for them. And so again, here I am, Patrick, trying to confront a bias, something that turned me off and triggered me, upset me, thought I was a red flag. They're just being defensive in their use of language so that they don't get shut down for trying to do what they do. So that was the second sort of psychological change I had that day. If you have any thoughts, jump in. Otherwise, I can keep going.
Yeah, no, I do think that that's really important, because so the integration is okay. I think the ceremony is the easy part. For as hard as it may be, for as challenging and as many times as you puke and take dumps, the integration is the most difficult thing. So you need to have people that have the lingo that you require, and because it can get pretty damn difficult. I remember, like the lady you were saying that she saw the entirety of, the world and all of that. Like, that's an experience that I received as well. That's called Satori. I was able to see how everything fits perfectly in place, and ultimately how nothing has So the way I understood it at the time was like nothing really has meaning. And then like that took me to a year and a half of extremely deep depression because like it doesn't really matter. But then as I was integrating, what my teacher told me was, you need to go hang out with Buddhists because these guys like understand all of this stuff. And you need to be able to, well, he told me a couple of things to do and, take certain supplements to regulate the hormones. So the whole idea of integration with people that know what the hell is happening, like number one, makes you feel like you're not crazy because they've experienced it. Like this is the weird part. Like if you give that same medicine to everybody, they're going to report similar situations. And even Jordan Peterson talks about ayahuasca and psilocybin, like how in a controlled environment, people are going to see the same shit. So like, I mean, that's pretty interesting to talk about. So as people are feeling and expanding and bringing from the brain stem to the neocortex, they're able to put it in words and they're able to live it because if you like, I know so many people, so many that like read just as many books as I do, like 20, 30 a year, maybe more, but then like they have all the knowledge here, but they like, okay, what the fuck is it good for if you're not using it? So the integration part is what's important, like I was telling you, because then you're able to embody that knowledge, that wisdom. So those groups, I think, are very important, and they vary. Like sometimes, like I struggle with super crunchy people too, and like sometimes there is a divorce between free market capitalism and crunchiness. Like they feel like they're two different worlds, that they're not compatible. But I think the universe works in Austrian economics because there is no vacuums. So, like the very first time I did San Pedro cactus, he showed me, no, I don't think it was not the first time. It was like second or third time. I was asking about monetary value. And like, wouldn't it be easier if there was no money because then poor people wouldn't suffer? Like, more like a socialist ideology. I mean, I was by then already a Ron Paul supporter, but so whenever I went in and so this is like an 8-hour ceremony and I was in my tent by myself. And after the 8 hours, I came out with a master's degree in monetary policy. And I understood how all of that worked. And I was like, okay, yeah, we need money. And I came out of my tent and I asked my teacher, wait, so Ron Paul is right? And my teacher said, yeah, he is right. So I was like, oh, fuck. So that was like another awakening. So integration with people that know what the hell you're going through is extremely important.
Yes. And so, continuing my tale of the day, the next thing that I learned was to not think of it as a bunch of people just, this was another thing. And I don't know where this came from. It was just part of how I came up in the world, I guess, that, most of these people were just druggies, just doing it for recreation and to feel good and to have a pleasurable, pleasant experience, because that's what drugs are for. And as I came to, voluntarism, anarcho-capitalism, the first big change that I came to terms with was it's okay for other people to do things that you might not think are good. So if they want to take drugs and that's their joy and their happiness and what they want to do with their body and their property and their life, then that is their freedom to do that. And you have to be okay sitting with people that make decisions that you might not personally make. That was the first big transition that I went through. I felt like it was part two day before yesterday at the conference. Part two was realizing that I don't know what the percentage was, but anecdotally it felt like 70% of the people at that place were not there for recreational usage purposes. They were damaged people like the rest of us that were looking for treatments for their damage outside of the traditional government approved and licensed medical system. If that one sentence can reach Republicans, any right-leaning person watching, please let that sentence sink in. These are people that are just as damaged as the rest of us, and maybe they've tried licensed medicine, maybe they've tried the drugs that are prescribed and approved by the FDA or whatever, and maybe they had bad side effects, maybe they didn't work, maybe they made it worse because that happens. I have direct experience in my personal life with someone trying approved medicine and approved drugs and it having serious side effects. So maybe they're looking for something else that is not as harsh or not as destructive or not as intense as these very strong medicines that are used for treating things like PTSD and depression. It seemed like PTSD and depression were two of the big things people were looking for alternative answers to there. And suddenly it was like that realization connected with the anarchist in me, the agorist in me. And I was like, well, holy shit, we all need to be trying to find alternative, at least be open to alternative answers than what's licensed and approved by the slowest moving innovator in the world called government, approved anything, right? And so, wow, I think I had that realization a few hours into the conference, and I pretty much walked around the rest of the time just trying to process that as I talked to people.
Yeah, there is a time and a place for antidepressants, and there's a lot of people. So here's the thing: there's a fallacy that whenever a lot of people become anarchists or libertarians, like suddenly anything the government says is wrong. Okay, so let's follow that logic. I get a letter from the government, and the letter says, "Dear Luis Fernando." So because you're calling me Luis Fernando, and the government always lies, therefore my name is not Luis Fernando. You see the fallacy? So like just automatically because the government says something doesn't mean that is wrong or that is evil.
Thank you. I've said that so many times on this channel. Viewers probably have heard it. It's like they take a rightful, justified, regularly useful distrust of anything related to government, and they over apply it to literally everything. And that's not a balanced view. Like even a member of the KKK can look at you and say racism is wrong and be correct. Like that's possible. So yeah. Sorry. Thank you for saying that.
Well, thank you for agreeing, because I think that's like super important to start with. So, a lot of people, because, like the government has done a lot of atrocious things, they don't believe in anything that they say, oh, it's FDA approved and I'm against it. Well, I mean, shit, no, that's not how it works. So there's a lot of people that have like really like their life's going well. They have a job, they have, everything's peachy, but they're still not, they feel pretty depressed. So there is a time and a place for that, medicine, which is, medicine.
And,
like
and not only that, just to add an asterisk, is like you would have to discount the hundreds of thousands of medical professionals that are all with genuinely good intent trying to find cures and treatments and help people. Like it's not like all 100,000 medical people. I don't even know what the number is, but it's not like all of those thousands of people have been like twisted by the government into working to hurt you and harm you. No, there's still a lot of good intention there and a lot of good and valid work happening there. It might be funded by theft and coercion, but anyway, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So with that said, like some people do like require that assistance that comes from like regular, orthodox medicine, like, Western medicine. Now, as far as like PTSD and depression, we don't always, so PTSD, and so PTSD and depression, let's talk about PTSD. PTSD comes from primarily the idea that, you go through something really traumatic, that you're like your mind is blown because it's so traumatic and so sometimes evil or so discombobulating that you cannot make heads or tails of why and how it happened. So there is a theory, there's a school of thought that says, from like Carl Jung's situation, that people that are not able to integrate their dark side are more prone to PTSD. So whenever you're able to integrate your dark side, like, I've had a PTSD from certain relationships to where I was feeling like, like my health was being damaged. So it wasn't until I actually got in touch with the dark side of my own side, my own self, and connected with it. Like, you're able to be like a monster yourself. Like, in a lot of times those circumstances would take you to do the same thing that those monsters did. So anyway, that comes through the inner work and the inner journey that you can find through entheogens. And then on the depression, one of my teachers told me, he said, depression is not something you have, it's something you do. And, whenever things happen in life your threshold for life, wherever it may be, like if the input of life, the entropy is greater, you may feel like the threshold is lower, and then it damages you and affects you. So you start taking less life in. So your pupils get bigger because you need more light. So you get into darker places. You like your body language, is more closed. You eat less. So there's a lot of things that biologically you do with your body to take in less life because there's a lot of stress going in. So whether it may be like, there's a lot of shit at work, there's a lot like in your relationship, whatever. So those things take us into that depression. And it's not always just, like the chemical imbalance happens because of the entropy in life. My aunt is maybe 65 years old. And I remember a long time ago, she said, most diseases are psychosomatic. They start in the mind and then they move into the body. This is a Western medicine lady that has also a freaking specialty on, has like 2 or 3 specialties. So the idea that, Western medicine, this woman's telling me these things and what my other, mystical, metaphysical teachers tell me, they are congruent, so to be able to get out of these things, you start doing actions, maybe connecting with one more person at a time, maybe standing up straight, maybe taking deeper breaths. Like I teach people that it's physiologically impossible to have anxiety when you take long, deep breaths. So, anxiety happens here. So as you calm down and inhale to the belly all the way in, so you're controlling your physiological responses, and that in turn changes what's going on here too. So there is some validation to the whole idea of doing left hand work with PTSD and depression that you have to integrate. What do you think about all of this? That was a mouthful.
I think I have an idea of what you meant. It was like a string of 3 sentences where you said you had to integrate your dark side, and then eventually you ended up with entheogens helping with that. Can we slow down and break that down? Like, what is this dark side concept? What does integrating it look like in practical terms? And how do entheogens help with that? Like, I realize these are totally noob questions, but it's like we speak a different language when we talk about this stuff.
I want to tell you that I appreciate you for slowing down and asking those questions, because sometimes I lose people when they don't slow down and explain those things. So the whole idea is that most times we are told that we need to be good, that we have to get a job, that we have to provide, be all these nice things. So the way my teacher explained it to me is there is a white versus black war, and white must win. And it's not a racial thing. It's more like, so we like happiness, we like all the good things, but we don't want death, we don't want suffering. But that is still part of life. We cannot just sweep it under the rug, And the more that we do that, the more dysfunction that we have in our lives. So as we are able to integrate the idea, for instance, what was it? Gulag Archipelago by Solzhenitsyn, when he was explaining all the horrible things that the Russians did, the camps and all of that, just getting into that mental exercise that maybe we could have done those things. Like we have the capability to not just be good and virtuous, but to be like complete monsters, and like the idea that we can hurt and we can damage others, and we are fully capable to do that. So until we really truly realize that we're able to commit atrocities just as much as we can commit good acts, we are not a full, complete person. And that's the integration of the dark side, because you're not a good person if you just think that you can only do good. You're a good person when you're able to commit a lot of atrocities, when you're able to create do things that may be considered evil, but not do them. Otherwise, you're just a bunny, that's just hopping about, and you cannot be good because that's all you can do. Like a good person is somebody that can do atrocities and not do them and walk the path. So the integration of the dark side through entheogens, what I saw is like all of that shit, like I could do, and I'm capable too. Like it shows you, like I was telling you, the mirror of your dark proclivities, and you're like, fuck, like that is me too. Like I can get really angry. I can get really mean, you know, and that is me too. Like some people say, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. Something took over me. That wasn't me. No, fuck no. That was you, and you're capable of doing that. So keeping that like balance in check, you know, and choosing to do the right thing, that's when you're a good person.
It's fascinating to me how many different systems of self-work talk about the same things in different language. Because as you're describing this dark side concept, I'm thinking of Jordan Peterson. I watched like 5 hours of Jordan Peterson talks today just because I was working on my sound booth and I needed something in the background to keep the brain going while the hands were working on boring stuff. And he was talking about, you know, the agreeable versus neurotic kind of personality differences, and how if there's too much of either one, things go off of a cliff. And and he even uses the integration term, which was another thing that, you know, I had never really recognized as a clinical term before, but sort of integrating both types or both sides of a personality. Also, there's a therapy methodology called internal family systems therapy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but if anybody's looking for a system to use for self-work, I would personally highly recommend IFS therapy, internal family systems therapy, because it teaches you to think of yourself in terms of different parts, and parts of you help in certain times. So in times of trauma, maybe a part of you will jump up to save you, or to prevent the trauma from being even worse, or to protect you in an extreme circumstance. Maybe that part is like an angry, violent response that might be necessary when you're being attacked. Let's say as I don't know, let's just, like if you're abused as a child, let's say you'll have this part of you that will become strong because you were subjected to this terrible stuff as a kid, but that part just doesn't go away. It stays with you as you grow up. And once that attacking force, that negative force that created or strengthened that part of you is no longer there, that part of you doesn't just disappear. It sticks around, and it can cause problems. It can become an issue because you still have this, you know, sort of, it's like a bouncer to a club that you don't want to have a bouncer in front of. Like, it's like, calm down, chill out. Why won't you just, you know, let me be, leave me alone. I don't need that part of you anymore. And IFS therapy talks about, rather than sort of like ignoring and scuttling these parts of us that used to be useful, because that's not how you get rid of them. Like the goal is to stop trying to get rid of them and to try and talk to them, find out where they came from, what they helped with, thank those parts for being there when you needed them, and then to sort of just gain an appreciation for them. And then as part of the process of like becoming a friend with that part and becoming at least partially appreciative of that part, that calms the part down and helps you integrate. Again, this word again for talking about this stuff. And that's from IFS therapy. So it's like all these different people are kind of talking about the same stuff. That's got to mean something, I guess.
Yeah, and ultimately, there is not one size fits all. So some people will gravitate towards some things, some people will gravitate towards others, depending on what, you know, their needs are, what they're comfortable with. But ultimately, I think all the, you know, self-inner journey takes you to the same place, which is self-actualization. And self-actualization, it means that you know who you are. So it's like that discovery of who you really are. So it's pretty powerful, you know, depending on like what the hell you're doing. It doesn't really matter as long as you're doing the work. You know, it could be self-introspection. It could be like stoicism. It could be, you name it. Like, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Jordan Peterson too. So like he talks about ayahuasca and he talks about mushrooms, and like, I mean, a lot of that stuff is pretty powerful.
So I guess I was most intrigued at the conference by mushrooms. It seems like they're on the scale of I don't know, harshness. They're pretty much under. I think they're less scary than, you know, pot, right? Like they're. I don't know how you'd say that, but like when you start talking about like LSD and MDMA and all this stuff, those are much more potent or powerful. Or maybe I'm totally off base here. Maybe mushrooms are just as powerful in dose, you know, depending on the dose. I don't know, but I grew a big curiosity around mushrooms because I probably did quick little introduction and questioning of like 25 people at the conference. Most of it wasn't on video. I just asked them what their experiences were. And really I tried to find out the why of their experience. Why are you taking this stuff? Is it recreation? That was my initial belief that was shattered. And I found out it seemed like, and of course these are anecdotal numbers, but it was like out of the 25 people I talked to, like 2/3 of them were using certain substances, especially mushroom, for depression and PTSD. Depression and PTSD just kept coming up over and over, and almost every single person I talked to said that one of these substances, especially mushrooms, helped with depression and to a lesser degree, maybe to an equal degree, PTSD. What's your experience with, like, I don't know how to ask the question. I guess two questions. One, what's your experience with mushrooms and those two things? And are there other things that would also help with that? And I don't know. I guess I'm looking for general knowledge of where to look next, really.
Yeah. Mushrooms are amazing in the sense that, like, so there is a microdosing situation. And the whole idea of microdosing is that it's imperceptible. Like, you don't feel any alteration. You know, you may notice that colors are brighter, but you're not tripping out. Like, I think you're supposed to take like 0.15 to 0.25 grams, which is almost nothing. So that is like extremely safe. And like at this point, the federal government even has agreed that psilocybin is a great antidepressant. Like, they've agreed, like, yeah, this is good for depression, this is good for PTSD, but we're still going to keep it as Schedule 1. So, you know, I think the real crime is not taking these substances, but keeping them away from people that could find them really useful for really, really cheap, because you can even grow them. You can buy like kits for like $50 online, and then like all you have to do is watch it. So there is, I think mushrooms is probably like the easiest way to get your feet wet into this realm, because they're so readily available, and it's something that you can do by yourself, given that you're, you know, taking small threshold doses and not just tripping balls, because then you need help to even go to the bathroom. So, and then you can, like, you know, move on to other things. I guess, like, personally, I started with ayahuasca, and then I did some Pedro cactus, and then I did psilocybin. That's like my progression.
Psilocybin is mushrooms, right? Just making sure I'm
yes,
clear.
Sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And one of my shamanic teachers that also does like lineage work was telling me that on my mom's side of the family, like, some great grandparent did work with mushrooms to help people do a lot of healing. So I needed to connect with him so I could bring that forth and pass it on to people. So lately, that's where I've been working more on. And it's really interesting because it's, you know, we have more in common with fungi than with vegetables. So, I mean, they're not obviously, you know, in the human kingdom or anything like that, but they're pretty alike, and they're. So the one thing that I find interesting, some people say, well, let's do recreation. I cannot do recreation at all. Like, if I just take 1 gram, they put me to work. And you know, to the point where I've done, like, it gets pretty damn crazy. Like, so I don't know if I should tell you the story, but I guess I should anyway. So sometimes I feel like I'm being called to do work. I don't know if you ever saw the Flatlanders video with the guy from Cosmos, what's his name? Shit. Well, anyway, back in the 80s when Carl Sagan. So he talks about the Flatlanders, that there's only like forward, backwards, and sideways, and they don't know about up and down. And then there's a voice, and then it takes them out. You've seen that, okay? So imagine like I'm a Flatlander and I just hear a voice and I don't know where it comes from because it's in another dimension. It doesn't. So anyway, they're like, okay, we kind of need you. So all right, so I take some and then I go to sleep and then like I start like buzzing, my body is buzzing, and then I just like I leave my body, I go somewhere else, and then I get implanted into a body of somebody that is in a chair. So I don't know where at this point, but I see a light in front of me that is really bright and a camera. And then I am connecting my awareness, and then I'm seeing that this is some form of Netflix for psychos. Like, so basically they're cutting up people open, killing them, like a pay-per-view for killings of sorts. So my mission at that point was to, like, because I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm about to get cut up and I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do. And then, so what I hear is just be present. So I look at the camera and I project myself into the camera. And what I'm showing is like just the wretchedness and evil that is taking place at this point. And I'm getting fucking chills as I'm telling you this story. So I'm connecting to the camera, sending myself onto that to let him know what's happening. And then I wake up back in my bed and I feel like, they're patting me like, good work, whatever. And then like 2 weeks later, I see on Facebook that some lady got taken to jail because she was running a ring of like assassination via pay-per-view. And one of the people that were paying to watch turned her in. And I almost shat myself because I was like, okay, like what the fuck happened? Like, this is totally like crazy, but like that kind of stuff happens. Like I cannot do recreational. They always put me to work, so this is something that happens, like the crazy stuff happens regularly. So I don't know what to to do with that, but I mean, it gets pretty impressive.
So this is a great way to bring up, I guess, a good ending fear of mine. So I'm very protective of my brain, my ability to reason, because it's literally all I have to make sense of my existence, right? And so when I hear about substances that act on my brain and make me see unreasonable things, that's a problem. That's a fear. That's something you want to protect your brain from things that might do that stuff to it, right? And especially if because your brain is sort of like that, it's the only window that you have to look out of. If you do something to the brain that changes its capacities or its reasonableness, you might have no perception of that change after it's done. So like you can do things to your brain and you'll have no idea you did something. It's just that the entire rest of your life will now be less reasonable, less you'll be less in touch with reality. So I mean, I don't know if I'm describing this fear very well, but I'm trying to protect my most valuable asset, so to speak. What are your thoughts on the dangers of this stuff?
Oh, I think that's like an absolutely reasonable thing to consider, especially because, like I was telling you, some people will take advantage and some people will try to use, because it's a really sensitive situation. With that said, if you're doing it in a controlled environment, by controlled, I mean somebody that you really trust can hold space for you, or that you know enough to where you can do it by yourself. And I was always taught by my teachers that you never do any of these things by yourself when you're a noob, because for many reasons. So if you're able to have that support system, somebody that you trust, like they're cool sitters, somebody that is experienced, it's something that will end up actually helping those thinking processes. It opens you up pretty greatly to understanding a lot of things. Now, there's one thing that I think Alan Watts said: when you get the message, hang up the phone. So it's not something that you do constantly. It's not even something that you can do recreationally, especially like ayahuasca and San Pedro taste like shit. It's not something that you want to do all the time, and they make you puke and they make you like shit water. It's not something that you do for fun. Like, they're called a purge for a reason. They purge you like physically, and you can like literally, like if you're seeing like some upheaval that you had with your dad when you were 6 years old, and you can puke it in your bucket and you can see it, you're like, there it is. Oh my goodness. Like, that's not something you want to do every weekend. You know, like at some point, like I had to wait like a whole year before I could even smell it again, because just the smell of it made me want to like run away. So recreational is not, and it's important to have people that you trust and that know what the hell are doing to walk you through this portal.
I mean, and that speaks again to it not being like a recreational thing that people are just doing for fun, and then they're using all this medical jargon to make it seem more legitimate, to because I guess they just justifiably do that a lot with marijuana, especially in Texas. You know, there's the whole free the weed movement uses a lot of medical cure, treatment type language, because that will hopefully, in the eyes of the ruling class, maybe make them change the laws in Texas a little bit quicker if they think it has legitimate uses. And so previously I always kind of looked disdainfully on that language, but I understood that it had a practical use in gaining more freedom. But it does seem my perceptions are changing all over the place. So I don't have like, I'm not at a conclusion yet, but I'm just kind of still working through it, and I'm seeing the other side now for the first time, and I'm enjoying myself. And man, Luis, I appreciate you giving me the benefit of your wisdom for the show today. Like, this has been a great talk, and I hope we can do it again as I continue to kind of hack my way through this.
Thank you for the opportunity. I do see that there are some interesting proclivities on people to talk about, cannabis as if it were a cure-all. But the funny part is that the vast majority of its curative properties don't come from smoking. Terence McKenna died of a brain tumor, and they were saying that cannabis, will cure brain tumors and all sorts of cancers, but you don't cure them by smoking it. So there is a big difference also, like, not to fool ourselves and to think that, you're going to be like healthy and healing. If you're like, the vast majority of the high performers that I know don't even smoke pot, and I do work in like a lot of the Forbes 500 companies, best companies to work for. Like, it's not something that they do on a regular basis at all. So, it's something to keep in mind. And there's a lot of people that say, the guy that was the national swimming in the Olympics, really tall guy, I can't remember his name. Because he smokes pot, I am just like him because I smoke pot. I can be a winner too. Well, we have to keep in mind, like, are you using it for medicinal purposes, or are you just doing it because you want to disconnect from your pain, because you want to, so it's all about the medicine. Is just like any other tool. It's how you use it, It's not just magically going to do its thing. You have to, again, integrate and face yourself. I like to be a highly productive person, and anything that lowers my productivity, I just really don't enjoy. And I have another life rule that I use for alcohol that I've recently kind of adopted for pot as well, for marijuana as well. Anytime times are good, I'll have a drink. Anytime times are bad or rough or tough, I don't touch alcohol. I don't have a beer. I don't have the whiskey. I don't do any of the things that will allow me to sort of not work through the problems, or that will give me an escape from them, because that's when it goes bad. That's how you go down a dark road to bad places that you don't come back from.
I mean, I would encourage people personally that's a great rule to have. When times are good, you can have the party times, because it's like what you just said. It depends on the reason why you're using this stuff. And the fact that alcohol has been magically separated from all the other intoxicants and mind-altering substances is a disservice all around, right?
Yeah, and I've seen actually like a lot of damage being done by that one legal substance, like it gets pretty ugly. And I see somebody asking about DMT. My teacher, if I have just a couple minutes, my teacher told me, DMT is it's kind of fun to do, but that's more like, into the recreational side. It's beautiful. It lasts whole 15 minutes, but it's really hard to do any work. And that's like the one reason why I've never just had like DMT by itself. Like when it becomes like more therapeutic, my teacher was mentioning adding a 5-MeO, which makes it last, an hour to 90 minutes, which is a perfect therapeutic time for like real work that you can do. So I actually got the chance to do it with some shamans from Colombia, and they put in like a little pipe, it's powder, and they just blow it up your nostrils, and it goes, and then the other side, and so they are like inhale and hold. So you're like, and they're like, and then you're like, fuck, I want to cry. Oh my God. And then it's like, oh, your eyes are like, fuck. And then you breathe out through your mouth, so you don't like, like expel the little powder, and you're like, and then they make, the ceremony, all the noise, all the songs and all of that. And
I'm so uncomfortable right now. You're giving drug use tips. This is part of what I'm working through. Yeah.
This is not like, again, it's not recreational. This is hard work. So I'm like doing a lot of, like, I was going through like a really rough time that time I did it. So I was like, okay, it's perfect. I need to do some work. And then he's like, how you doing? And all I remember that I could say is like, I feel like I have that emotion really stuck in my right hamstring. And he's like, all right, inhale. And then he goes again. I'm like, shit, okay. So it lasted another 30 minutes, but it gave me just enough time to be able to process all this shit. And it was like, I was a new person. And then the next day, I did holotropic breath work with Sean Stone and his girlfriend, Kyla. And, this is basically harvesting the DMT that you produce naturally through breath work. And I was connecting with intergalactic, interdimensional brethren. I was crying because I felt home whenever I connected to them. And I was like, holy freaking heck, this, like, I can do this without any substances. Sweet. So, yeah, I mean, the rabbit hole keeps going. And actually, John Mackey, one of my heroes that I've gotten to meet and hang out with, the founder of Whole Foods, he does holotropic breath work too. So, like there's a lot of really influential people that have done all of these things. I mean, Tony Robbins and Mike Tyson have done ayahuasca, and they've done all these things. And like, so it's not just like some fringe crunchy people that are doing it. Like, this is the people that are game changers, that are into interesting places in society, affecting a lot of good, positive change.
So I guess my final takeaway, the message to people that are from my background, and all this stuff makes them feel like sinners and uncomfortable, I don't know, drug addicts or something. Like, there is a significant number of people that, if talked to individually, would just be anecdotal evidence. But there is thousands of people that seem to successfully treat some mental issues with things like mushrooms, and I'm trying to only make truth statements here. I'm trying to only make statements that I can, from end to end, say are verifiably true. So the medications that you might be prescribed if you go to a licensed professional come with side effects, and some of those side effects can be pretty bad. And the side effects from something, what I'm learning, and correct me if I'm wrong, from something like mushrooms, the chance of the type of side effects on the level of some of the medicines that you'll get, for depression or something from a psychiatrist, it's just like are almost non-existent, especially with the microdosing thing. So I would just, I don't know, I would just ask that you, if you're coming from a background like mine, understand that the government is absolutely restricting people's access to something that verifiably has positive benefits for certain issues. And if you're having negative, like serious negative effects from the prescription medication, it might be worth you looking into and having an open mind to some of this stuff. How was that? How was that for a conclusion? That's probably pretty tame.
No, it's a great conclusion. I just want to also talk about like the only time that you can actually have a pernicious effect during ceremony is if you do ceremony with antidepressants. Like the only times that you're gonna like Google and find out people that died from taking ayahuasca is because they were taking antidepressants. Like that's the one pernicious counter side effect, you know. So if anybody is ever trying to take any of these things, they need to be off of antidepressants for at least 3 months. Like that's the one, like, so they tell you like before you do ayahuasca, before you do San Pedro, like an actual ceremony, they're like, you know, 2 weeks before, don't eat anything that's fermented, and don't eat meat, and like a week before, and don't eat a lot of like, so you have a diet that you follow, so you're cleaner when you're communing with, you know, the substances. And like they even ask you not to have sex for 3 days before and 3 days after, even with yourself. So like there's a lot of cleanliness that go into that. So when you show up, you're because like the same energy that you're using for sex is the same energy that you use for spiritual work. So, you know, you just have one tank. So, you know, but the one thing that is pernicious is ceremony with antidepressants. So that's why, like, another reason why, like, people need to go with others that know what the hell is happening to keep you safe. At some point I got invited to do like to participate as a helper at a ceremony, and they were not even interviewing participants. I'm like this can, like, somebody can die. And not just that, but like you cannot just accept like 80 people on a fucking ceremony. Just like it was just like a money-making scheme.
Oh, like an ayahuasca ceremony? They weren't asking if people were on antidepressants or whatever?
They weren't asking any questions at all. And I'm like, if you're not going to interview individually, I don't want anything to do with this, because my name's going to be in it and somebody's going to get hurt, and I will be responsible. I don't want to be responsible for any of that. So we have to be smart in doing, you know, those things.
Luis, you mean you don't need a license to be held accountable? Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. So it's just, you know, you have to be smart.
I've really appreciated the benefit of your time. Thank you for providing it over the past hour. And I hope we can have you back, because there's probably like 5 more topics that we could go into. And I thought I was going to get to more than one today, but this one was just too deep. So,
well, let's do more next time soon.
All right. I appreciate you joining me. And I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for, I've been reading all the comments. Thanks, guys. And I'll see you on the Discord server after the show. Have a good one.